Hi everybody and welcome to Pixel Politics, the podcast that talks about politics and video games in an interesting, new and unique way. It is my pleasure to be joined by Marijam Didžgalvytė. She is a games activist who is the owner of Left Let Up, a YouTube channel which offers a unique progressive political take on the video game industry. She also has bylines in online publications such as Kotaku, I'm so jealous of that, and The Guardian. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jack. Yeah, it's a shame because you see Kotaku UK is now dead, so quite a few of my pieces are kind of like now in the archives rather than being on the glorious website.
What happened to it? What happened to it? Did it just vanish?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess they decided for some reason it's financially not viable for them. I think back in the day there was a whole discourse about them, lots of industry gossip, but I can't say that I massively caught up on it. There's different industry gossip every day.
Yeah, I heard that apparently there was some like stuff underground there that wasn't too good, and they're kind of like putting content out that a lot of people don't like.
I hope that wasn't mine.
No, I'm sure yours is very good, but right now when it was at its height of glory, it's kind of like lost a bit, But Marijam, thank you for joining me. You're a political activist in the games community. Can you tell me a bit about what that means and what you do?
A lot of faff and nervous breakdowns and crying at Twitter as of late, obviously, because it's all been kind of a bit more online than I'd like it to be. But I don't know. I guess I used to be the sort of like the video games person in like the leftist London milieu. But at some point, and I think after writing my master's thesis in particular at Goldsmiths, which was all about games and politics, I started and also realizing as well that games are now bigger than film and music industries combined around 2016, 2017 that happened. And then I kind of started looking into the actual games industry and trying to understand what is the cultural and political and sociological kind of composition in that. And then I suddenly became like the politics person in the games industry, and coming to it from my from fairly, I guess, a bit unusual background where I was very just interested in street activism and just really radical expression of politics. I was very caught off guard how for all the talks of a desire of radical change within the games industry, it still can be a fairly conservative place in more ways than one, not only in its attitudes towards the depiction of what happens in games themselves, but also in terms of how the games are made and its modes of production, etc. So what started essentially as like a Medium blog, then bloomed in and then I got opportunities to also write for when I say got opportunities, I essentially just like pitched a bunch of people to write for some great publications like Vice and Guardian and Kotaku Games Industry, Biz or whatnot. Yeah. But then I realized, I have this mobile phone with which I can film things, and now it's amazing the quality of the stuff you can get, So with my Pixel 3, or I want to say it was 3.
I'm happy you mentioned Pixel because there's a name, Pixel Politics.
Yes, but you're not sponsored yet, but should be.
Oh, I hope so.
Accepting that dirty Google money.
Honestly, I'd accept that.
I'd take it.
I'd take it, even if it is a big corporate agency.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Of course, I can't afford not to. So absolutely.
Exactly.
Anyways, so just started filming my Left Up videos. That was a Twitter-based show, So I kind of figured, I'm gonna keep them like just under, just over 2 minutes and just have them released all on Twitter. And then I kind of used YouTube more as an archive. So they're all now searchable on YouTube as well. But they were initially released on Twitter where they would get, like the tens of thousands of views, which was great. And really, I think started challenging again, what politics and radical politics in particular means in the gaming milieu. And then things kind of started really picking up in a much more real life sense around 2018 when the Game Workers Unite movement was born, which is a push for unionization in the video games industry. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to be kind of around the circles where this was all being organized, and I was able to help out to co-found the UK branch of that, and also just become the comms person for the Game Workers Unite movement. And so then for the next couple of years, I was really just organizing a lot in that space, and a lot of incredible victories were achieved, as well as a birth of quite a few branches internationally that are still active to this day. Game Workers Night now is sort of like, exactly, more focusing on its own local branches, and I stepped away from the movement to again kind of maybe look more into the options of, again, thinking of how culture how conversations of culture in games can be again made in a much more in a much more creative manner, because I think a lot of the time games industry can be sort of like very much stuck in its own echo chamber, and the kind of trends, even aesthetic ones or societal ones, people just bounce off of each other, and not a lot of kind of external thinking gets in. So I'm trying to do a bit of that, and hopefully there has been a bit of a pause with Left. I know I can imagine yourself, Jack, as well, as like a fellow content creator. You'll know what like the kind of COVID malaise means, and how you're just, like I used to be inspired by street movements and picket lines and, like pub drinks after a demonstration and things like this. And now, when that source of serotonin is gone, it's kind of a little bit trickier to motivate yourself. However, enough people now approach me saying that kind of content seems to be of necessity, that I am very much looking forward to bringing back in spring, since I film outside most of the time, a little show, and I want it to just be kind of nice and warm for me to get back to it.
Yeah, I think that, content creation during this time is super hard, and it's because of COVID.
On the other hand, it's also burgeoning, and there's so many incredible content creators that are being born, like, I mean, there's some dangers with it. Like I worry about it all the time, and I feel like a bit hypocritical myself that there's now like kind of a cultivation of like an electronic celebrity, like little e-celebs and little influencer types, and why do those voices matter than others? And then, becomes like a whole competition. I like that one or don't like that one. And it's kind of all long, but I mean, we as the left have been so we abandoned we never really caught up with the online spaces, and then for a long time they were taken by like right-wing ideologies. So to try and challenge that whole hegemony is really, really important. So the more the better.
Yeah, exactly. And watching Left Up, one of your posts was about COVID and the impact COVID is having on our lives, because on one hand you've got sort of you've got this, everyone's content creating and people kind of like flourishing in their own spaces. But at the same time, especially within the games industry, you have the games industry making a lot of money, which a lot of people thought wouldn't happen. But everyone seems to have more cash to spend on doing their pastimes. And it might be leading to even a larger inequality gap between the workers and, say, the rich people. Is that something that you agree with? Like, it's just a statement? Because I think the games industry, it grew billions, like over 70% in between 2019 and 2020 or something. And that's a astronomical number, to be honest. So what do you think about that? Is that an issue, a contentious issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you had a really good observation when you noticed that in around March, nobody really thought that games would be the thing that would take off, and quite a few video games companies stocks did tank, because I think a lot of people were thinking that in a time of crisis, people will not necessarily be, taking on such, escapist hobbies or whatnot, that they will actually be only caring for their necessities. So, perhaps, and games would not necessarily be seen as that. However, of course, I don't think anyone could have predicted just the length of time that we are going to be all stuck at home. And so what flourishes during that time? Well, of course, just the infrastructure that you utilize in order to, have your pastime after work. So games just exploded, right? And it's now, absolutely, I think without competition, the main cultural realm beyond films and music and and of course, sadly, sports as well. So sports are kind of pretty dead now as well. So gaming is where it's at. So it's fascinating to see a lot more interest even just also, from the mainstream media or whatnot. But on the other hand, exactly, that also exposes a lot of the problems and issues that we have in this sphere. So whilst I think, the stock prices of the major companies have increased, and whilst the security of being, a development, someone who is developing games is really great. And there's so much interest in growing, development teams. And so, there's a huge boom in the industry. What we're forgetting, and this was, I suppose, what my video was about, that behind all of these, verified, beautiful kind of developer types, actually, there is a collapsing industry, which is kind of industry adjacent things. So, for instance, games industry events are all cancelled. So, the catering teams, maybe for those that have lost their jobs, the security for those have lost their jobs. All the offices are now, are now gone. So the people that were maybe cleaning the offices, or again, catering or whatnot, that all of their jobs are gone. So, I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm just saying that I think there's a lot of fetishism of the stars of game development, and we kind of forget the more silent voices within that. And this is, without me even beginning to rant about what my usual problem with the games industry is, which is our complete ignoring of the plight that certain populations have to go through in order for us to have the infrastructure that we create our games on. So and again, I think, I mean, it's very much showed by statistics that the inequality, not only of course in the games industry, but globally, has just gone on absolutely on steroids, not only between the working classes that are actually having to do the essential labor that we all now depend on, and the difference between those individuals and of course the much more secure or just, well, let's be honest, middle class jobs such as game making or other tech industry jobs where everybody's just kind of safe at home and with their safe, secure jobs, but also geographically, right? So I mean, like, vaccine nationalism is certainly a thing, and we can absolutely foresee the future where people in much richer countries will all be safe from COVID and traveling around and having open economies, whereas I think we're only seeing the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis in global South, and again, so geographically the inequality for the populations that are already struggling are only going to get worse.
Yeah, so it's sort of kind of exemplifying the sort of north-south divide again, in terms of inequality and economic inequality, helped by COVID, because if African countries are poorer, COVID isn't going to help them, or if they're going to have to stay at home or whatever, So it's sort of that north-south divide. So that it's sort of an old argument, but it's coming back into the forefront, I guess.
Yeah, the games industry would not exist if it wouldn't be for Democratic Republic of Congo, where all the minerals are mined for the devices that we're playing our games on. So the lack, the absolute size of abandonment, I think, is really, and the intensity of it is really unfair and horrific, So for all my enthusiasm and love for gaming as like a fascinating creative medium, one that I engage in, most days, I am also just devastated by the impact of it on certain populations, as well as its growing impact in terms of CO2 emissions and things like that.
Yeah, like CO2 emissions is it's a big thing, because I think it was FIFA, the new FIFA, the amount of CO2 emissions that it produced in terms of manufacturing the game itself was the equivalent of running 100 cars for a year or something. I think that's a statistic that I heard, and that's that's one game.
Absolutely. So PS4 PS4, that's one console out of the hundreds of different types of consoles that there are. Only the creation of PS4, and I guess also utilizing of it as well, emits the same annual CO2 as the whole of Estonia, which is, so with a couple of million people live there. So when you think about it that way, you realize that, I don't know, I work and try and cultivate and inspire creativity in an industry that actually, is just horrific in so many different ways.
Exactly. I think, government plays a big role in trying to resolve these issues. Not just national government, but international organizations. And I don't think these international organizations are really kind of stepping up. I understand they don't have the sort of the institutional and legislative power to kind of get countries together to talk. But at the same time, like, there needs to be justice for economic inequality and also climate change issues as well, because the climate and the economics are just intrinsically interlinked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to imply to say that there's someone not playing games that particular day or whatnot, like that somehow that will save climate change. I don't think it's an individual decision necessarily. However, where I think the strength and power could lie in is a pressure from perhaps the employees of these major corporations that are creating these hardware products to threaten strike, maybe, for instance, unless those companies change their construction manufacturing practices to reflect on or to change the damage that they're creating. So I think worker power in these companies could have a lot of organized sort of consequences, but we need to inspire this entire milieu to even see themselves as laborers, because I think a lot of the time the myth that exists in the games industry is that you're doing it for passion, so you're so lucky to even have that job, and that you should never complain because it sounds like such a fun industry, and maybe what do you just like play games all day? Is that what you do? Which is a myth.
Well, it's the same with the content creation, right? It's like, well, if you content create about video games, people think you just play video games all the time. And yeah, I have a side job where I review games, but like, it doesn't pay, and also like that's not the main thing. Like, the main thing is the Pixel Politics channel, and people, even just for me, let alone the developers who are going through crunch or some aspects of crunch. For example, we've talked about on the show before Cyberpunk and the bad crunch that went on there, but people forget about that. It's sort of like, you have people behind the scenes, even just sort of like you said, people working at, say, a show of E3, dealing with the lighting or the production elements. And you hear, for example, big companies such as IGN, right? And people who work there working endless hours to try and get to cover every single game. Because back in the day, like, I don't think there was protection for workers in terms of how much they could work or, how many hours. I think it's gotten better now. Would you say that it has? Is there a good trend going in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you bring up the also the plight of photojournalists as well. Like, a lot of the time, the embargo hours are really, really, antisocial, and you have to stay up and wait for that particular hour so that then you can write about or release that particular piece. As well as, you're reviewing games. That doesn't mean that you're playing games that you like all the time, right? So a lot of the time you're playing games that you probably don't even care about that much, but this is your job. And
I don't particularly care about a game where I turn into an insect. That's one of the games I had to review.
That actually sounds amazing.
Do you like insects? Because I don't like insects at all. Like,
I was just watching David Attenborough with my housemate yesterday, and she was like, "Yeah, I hate insects." Whereas I'm like, I'm all for that. For instance, I don't get birds. Like, birds to me just seem a bit like, a bit pointless.
I'll send you a link to the game, then you'll like the game.
Maybe because my granddad, he's a beekeeper, so to me, like, bees are like my my little loves and my little animal that I adore the most.
Yeah, I like bees too.
They're so badass, right?
They are.
They just do cool things.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Where were we? So reviewing the games, this can also be a very, very tricky instance. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought when I was thinking about the awesome bees. In terms of this is where I was going to go with this. What is really interesting, and I think what the games industry, the way that it is in 2020, 2021, could be really improving for, I guess, working conditions for everybody else, is that it has proved that you can create huge products with like multi-million-pound budgets and massive production values and whatnot. But you can do it all from the comfort of your home, So I think that the idea of working from home, which I think for many is a much more attractive one, is one that people will be looking at game companies and seeing how they did it, and game companies have been actually very, very quick in creating the infrastructures for people to make products at home much easier, and to learn from them, and actually argue for this to maybe be implemented in so many many different other industries if the workers want that, as well as trialing things like 4-day weeks, or flexible schedules. I can see games industry as being like at the forefront of it all,
Yeah.
So in that sense I think it's quite optimistic, because we used to be so used to 40-hour weeks, and huge commutes, and things like this. And I think gaming, the way that it's being made now, potentially could be bringing the benefits of this new changed world. Exactly. We don't want to necessarily go back to normal how it was always before.
Yeah.
We actually want to find a home work balance that works for everybody.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether or not content creators actually decide to go back into their studios, or whether they stay at home. Because I think in some aspects it's more efficient and you can time manage better. And I'm using OBS, right? And it's a great software, but it's free software that anyone can use, and it's allowed me to gain new skills, right? And that's what COVID has been. In some ways, obviously, it's been horrendous. In other ways, it's actually allowed us to develop skills, and hopefully, in the industry, people will be able to take these skills and and to create more content or whatever, and alongside that, you've got adequate protections in place from employers. You hear these horror stories, for example, Cyberpunk and the crunch, and they were denying it, I think, for a period of time, but it seems like the game did have a significant amount of crunch. Is crunch something that you're particularly concerned about? Because is it? Well, I don't know how widestream it is in terms of the video game industry. I'm guessing the indie developers, I'm guessing they're facing more issues. I don't know. I'm not too advert. I don't have too much knowledge on the issue, to be honest.
Sure. So, well, first of all, I think, again, and this is down to campaigns by awesome organizations like Game Workers Unite, and things like that, where we have now made the word crunch almost like a household word. Like, it actually has entered the general vocabulary, I feel like, whereas before it was just some sort of like part of some weird esoteric terminology that nobody really understood what it was. But because there's been just so much coverage in the past couple of years about long work and long work hours, that I'm just very, very encouraged just by the cultural change. And I think crunch was being seen as something that just happens, and whereas actually we found out due to these campaigns that crunch was always kind of written into the timelines and to the schedules, and that it was never really bad management. It was, because I used to say, I remember I used to say like, it's just bad management, mismanagement, and that's what causes crunch, which is, people having like 90-hour weeks and things like this. Whereas actually you find out by sometimes the people leaking company policies and things like that, that a lot of the time managers absolutely assume that crunch is just something that's going to happen, so they can then announce release dates that are much maybe sooner than perhaps a workplace without crunch could be making the product. And of course, just to also humanize the story, if an employee crunches, not only do their mental health completely collapses, they don't see their family, this just becomes the cycle and competition between the workforce, like, I don't know, I crunched 70 hours a week this time, like I did 90, or like, okay, I left 50. This also completely it really discriminates against people that have children, and caring responsibilities. So yeah, it's a huge issue. But I think now enough exposition and kind of bad PR has been given to companies that do this, that I think companies are much more wary about this, because like if they're going to try and make their employees crunch, that information may potentially leak, and then there will be a big furor by with a big write-up at Bloomberg or whatnot. But of course, crunch is not the only not the only issue that our industry faces. You know, all types of harassment have sadly taken place. That's probably a mismanagement. Is like mass layoffs are also very prominent in the industry. So, you know, I think Activision Blizzard is probably the most famous one in the past couple of years, where they just fired 700 people with no severance pay. But I think in the end, actually by the establishment of a union at that particular point, they were able to claim severance in the end. But yeah, mass layoffs are huge, and you know, you could be spending years and years on a particular game that then gets scrapped by some, you know, by some directors last minute, and then not only you have nothing to show in terms of being in the credits of the game, but also, you know, then you have no job, and so
well, EA's done that with Star Wars, some of their Star Wars games. I think Amy Hennig was a part of that, the lady who worked on the Uncharted franchise. They kind of just, they got it so far through development, and then they were just like, nah, we're not going to do it anymore. It's just, you know, when you have that much cash to wave around, I think sometimes big corporate agencies feel like they can do that if it's not going to bring back the returns. And I think that there's been a shift towards like a games of service model. In terms of, you know, like you're constantly logging into this game in order to improve your stats or whatever, and it's sort of an online database where everyone gets together, communities, you know. And I wonder if that's actually playing a part in terms of making the industry more kind of or promoting levels of inequality that shouldn't be there, because as a games of service, you're like content creators, it's like you're constantly working on something. You don't just shut the game off once it's done, or you maybe implement DLC down the line. This game is like Destiny 2. You're constantly evolving it. So I wonder if that's like making things worse. What do you think about that? Is that something?
Well, I mean, I have a personal opinion of just complete heartbreak, because for me, like first-person shooters, single-player first-person shooters are probably like my most favorite genre of games, you know, and that's the stuff that I grew up on, you know, whether it's, you know, the Mafia games and Wolfenstein Saga and BioShock or whatnot. So they're like my Max Payne, you know, they're my little staples of how I even got into gaming. And the idea that, now it's much more profitable. Well, they argue that it's due to piracy, but I think it's a few issues, that it's much more profitable to make multiplayer games, or as you say, games that are just like, like where people, there's constant small, downloadable content packages and things like that. Whereas, you know, a set piece of art and like, I don't know, 7-hour or 8-hour gameplay in one particular product that maybe you buy for a set price, that is now a dying breed of a video game, I guess, form or format. Which is very upsetting, and I think it does kill creativity, you know, like, and exactly. If you are a worker in a games company now, you know, increasingly you're not necessarily have a variety of, okay, I'll work on that game for 3 years and then I'll work on that project for a couple of years and that product, you know, that bit 6 months or whatever. And now it is very possible that maybe you got into a games industry and for the past like 15 years, you just worked on the same game, you know, and there will be no end to that. And I can see how that will just, you know, sap any sense of love for the, you know, or passion for the product, or anything can help. But I mean, isn't this just a reflection on the fact that you know, again, for all of my love of incredible artistic creations that they're in it, video games industry is a hyper capitalist you know, industry that is at the forefront of kind of neoliberal policies that we're seeing, and really just exploits every possible corner of that in so many different ways, whether that's, you know, the really predatory hyper casual games or the treatment of the workers, or also like there's a lot of horror stories also from like esports tournaments, you know, where the young talent just gets completely used and abused. And so it's just never ending. I think this is the thing, is like games industry would like to see, or, you know, people like me that want to, you know, that adore the fact that there's now like video games museum and that there's so many like artistic curation of games. We would like to see, you know, gaming scene as much more as a space for, kind of cultural inspiration. But we can never escape the fact that actually, the kind of birth and blooming of the games industry actually piggybacks off of the culture of Silicon Valley, and that milieu and that industry. So, and that's very much reflected, I think, in the composition of the companies and also of these really, again, predatory ways of making money, So, although I romanticize the history of art a lot of the time and then trying to apply that into gaming, I can never forget the fact that actually, the parallels of the birth of these industries go much closer to the overlords of the tech industries that we're now seeing. And we're also seeing the birth of monopolies in the games industry as well, like so many, you mentioned the EA, there's obviously, Ubisoft, Activision, Blizzard, the creators of TikTok, they're also, Tencent, of course. Yeah. So they're just buying up smaller companies all the time. So, and that, that destroys creativity as well.
Tencent is the main proponent of that. It's always buying up smaller companies.
And they won't necessarily just buy up companies, all right, but they will also invest in shares and things like this. But I think there's so many quite a few eyebrow raising.
Well, like you look on Wikipedia and you see Tencent and you see how many companies they own or what companies or what games they develop, and you're like, wow. Like that is a monopoly.
They're quite everywhere for sure.
They are everywhere, from PUBG to everything,
But so it's like I just read also BBC News today that like Apple buy up a company every 3 or 4 weeks, and their profits are only rising. So I don't know. I'm quite, I have good days and bad days, and today I'm smiling, but a lot of the time it's like it's kind of through the tears because I pride myself, again, coming from those like the radical milieus, as someone who wants to remain somehow pure in these very toxic times, but it's so hard to escape from it all, and at all times I just feel hypocrisy, and I just feel such just pain inside of me, just kind of becoming cog in the machine, but then critiquing the machine. And what does that mean? Am I also benefiting from all those issues, And I think especially in the social media networks, there's such a like economy of hate in it all. And it's just, it can be, sometimes you sort of turn yourself away, like, put yourself a little bit at a distance and think, maybe I should just go back to Lithuania, buy like a little tiny 10,000 pound cottage, like in the fields somewhere, get a dog, get a goat, and bees and beehives, and that's it. Just say goodbye to it all.
Just beehives, just loads of bees, just tons of bees.
They're like actual, they're like undisputed good for the world,
They are, without bees, the whole planet would die. It's just
yes, and we're going closer to that as well. So
well, exactly. But I think that you're right, and there's a degree of hypocrisy. Dr. Alfie Bound mentioned a couple.
We love Alfie, absolutely.
Alfie's great. He's fantastic. Check him out. I think he's left this game on Twitter. I think that's it.
Yes, and a writer of some incredibly stellar books. So the themes that you and me are talking about.
Well, I didn't actually get to ask him about his book, one of his books. I think it was PlayStation Dreamworld. Didn't get a chance, but maybe
there's just so much to talk with him. Like every time you talk to him, you just scratch the surface on his incredibly rich brain and such amazing empathetic takes on it all.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you're right. There's like hypocrisy, and he mentioned that, and it's the same for me. It's we're playing these sort of right wing in nature sort of Call of Duty games, like for example Warzone. But at the same time, you want to critique it, and you feel kind of bad about that because you're playing and you're putting money into these games, but you're kind of you're saying things that are kind of contradicting what you're doing. But I think as long as like there's critique there, then I think the industry will hopefully improve. And I think you're right, and I think that it is going in the right direction. Even as you said, it was hyper-capitalist.
Yeah, and it's quite narcissistic sometimes. Those critiques get taken as you hurting somebody's like I don't know, personal prestige or something like that. Again, in the type of like Twitter milieux, and it's just a shame, like a critic. And again, for instance, like being an art critic, right? Or even art industry critic is like a very, you know, highbrow profession that you probably didn't have a house in Islington and, you know, like your beautiful bookshelves and you have like really cool wine parties in the evening, you know, but we are not giving the same kind of level of I don't know, just faith to whether they're game critics or games industry critics, you know, but you know, we do read our theory and we do try and apply it to these industries, and we do try and utilize, you know, kind of historical occurrences and precedent to analyze this industry. But like, yeah, very little of that same faith is given to us, that, you know, if you are a game developer, like, bless you, like, but that's your job, and like maybe but, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same skill set as somebody who is a little bit away and is able to give those more, you know, broader historical critiques. They can get so personal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what social media plays a part. It's all personal.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the whole other thing.
Yeah, I recently wrote a blog about political influences and why they should be kept in games. Because,
interesting.
Yeah, because
political influences or influencers?
Influences.
Okay. I think both are interesting, but I'd love to hear the critique of political influencers as well. I think, you know, I think they're also a whole.
Yeah, it's a whole nother thing, and it was actually some guy commented on, you know, Neil Druckmann. He's the studio lead of The Last of Us.
Oh yes. Oh gosh, yeah, he was very defensive, wasn't he?
He was, and like. He was stating how, you know, politics, because his game's highly political. You know, I don't know if you played it. Have you played The Last of Us?
Yeah. I played the first one. The second one I haven't played.
I can't play it because I don't like blood and I don't like gore, so I won't touch it.
Okay.
But still, I understand the premise of the game. But no, someone was like critiquing him and saying, well, you shouldn't really have put politics in games and that. And, you know, I understood that argument, but my point of view was that when they keep it in some aspects, if it's going to positively impact the story and it's going to show how it's going to maybe represent sort of different groups of society and show how sort of maybe groups are marginalized and how we can improve upon that, and if the politics is used in a way that benefits communities and people, keep it in. And he was agreeing with that argument too. What do you think about that? Is that something that you think? Because I understand like political influence are not always good, but if they're used in the right way, do you think it's something that should be in game?
Okay, so I mean, I think it's an age-old argument now that I think by kind of for the most part has already been won and understood, the fact that like every cultural artifact is political, and like the idea that video games somehow wouldn't be is like for the birds. And I mean, it's really fascinating. Sometimes people like literally and Gavs like. They will make a game about like Americans in the Middle East and how heroic that was. And we'll say, but this game is like not really about politics, which is just so like, what are you doing? I understand that you have like share prices and maybe that's why you can't say things, but this just looks like really childish.
It was like 6 days of Fallujah.
Yeah, that's exactly what.
That's exactly it, right? Like, he's denying that there's any kind of political. He's not denying there's no political influence in there, but he's saying that it's from the game's going to be from the perspective of a soldier and what it's like to be at war or something.
Oh yeah, because we're definitely like lacking those type of games.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so he's trying to push it away from the political nature in order to not pick people off. But then he's facing so much backlash because you can't have politics in your games. You just can't have it, apparently. Like a lot of people still believe that, and they still believe that there's no influences, and it's just like, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's still, you know, amazing. Look, we've been talking about games and politics for like 45 minutes or so, and we haven't yet mentioned Gamergate. So that's really cool.
No.
So anyways, just, I mean, that was the whole, I guess, main argument around that time, right? And I mean, it's so redundant, I think, at this point. Like, I mean, you know, after Trump and everything, I think the cultural, you know, just accountability that is asked of from. You know, whether there's celebrities or also the cultural artifacts is like much higher for better reasons. However, where to me that argument stops and becomes much less interesting is the idea that only representation in video games is where the buck stops, you know? So like, if only we had like more women or in video games and like, shooting other people or whatnot, that somehow that's feminism, like, I don't know if you know this, but like Lara Croft is just like essentially a very rigid girl that like travels around the world destroying a lot of like archaeologically really important places, and just like asks poor people to do stuff for her, like,
and she's incredibly rich.
Yeah, just like poor little rich girl, so like to me, like she's not really a feminist icon, and I'm like, I have much more in common with like, I don't know, I'd say working class men than I have with her. So to me, that was like but she was such a like badass woman, somehow representation matters sort of thing. So that to me, it just becomes a little bit boring when we don't really utilize intersectionality as it's meant to be, intersecting privileges or oppressions. And also on the other hand, like I don't know, I'm also at the point with my politics, and again, my politics are constantly evolving, I'm not one to just like have them set, but I'm kind of at the point where like I don't necessarily care, for instance, how gory your video game is, as like I care about the story of what happens in game a little bit less as of late than, for instance, about the working conditions in the company that made it. I feel like if there's good living wage and like really, really good conditions and I don't know, no crunch in the company, then I kind of seldom care about the messaging. Obviously there's like some really, really, horrific fascistic video games that you could be making, and those seem to be still very popular, and that just should be something that's kind of looked at. But what I'm sort of really quite sick of, I suppose, is seeing really cutesy little, very, very cute little unchallenging politics games, but I know for a fact that the team behind the making of it were like really miserable and unhappy, and maybe there was so much more oppression happening behind the scenes, but they make a really cute video game, so hence it's okay. And I mean, obviously, it's all very nuanced and really, really depends, but I guess obviously, the depiction of certain themes and games is like incredibly important because it creates that cultural hegemony that is a place of push and pull, and is a place of constant conflict, as Stuart Hall writes about, right? So it's something that we have to somehow reclaim or diversify anyways, because it has been so monolithic up to a certain point, but it's not all there is what I'm trying to say. And like, for instance, to me, like, I don't care how progressive your video game is looking if, again, we're talking about like, even again, modes of production of what it is being, what of the devices that we're playing it on or whatnot, or what happened behind the scenes. So again, it needs to be a bit more nuanced conversation than like, gore is a bad video game, and like, I don't know, a feminist icon in a game is a good video game,
Yeah, I agree. It's got, like you said, the push and pull, and there's got to be, the workers themselves have to be represented and shown that, like, it's not okay for, the bosses to enforce crunch or to discriminate or
like
whatever.
For instance, you see sometimes, now, trans issues being very much, and for the better depicted in video games, which is fantastic, that diversifies again, the kind of, the icons, I suppose, of the games, and creates much more interesting portrayal. But then you will hear that there's actually been no trans people that were actually employed by the company, or like no trans people were actually consulted about the portrayal of those characters, so it just becomes like, we sometimes are, utilizing things just because it's like in, rather than looking at structural change.
Definitely. I wanted to talk to you about esports, because you've mentioned it earlier, and you have a lot of prize money being earned by some of the top competitors. Traditionally, sporting events and sports have been very high earning for, for example, football. The players earn a lot of money, and, an outrageous amount of money that most people think is, I'm not saying football's not a hard sport to learn and to become good at, but it's not really, it's not worth the money that they earn. Esports is kind of getting that way too, not in terms of like, to become an esports player, you need incredible skill, but they're earning a lot of money and they're starting to earn more. Now, I'm going to see if I can find a fact. It's like in 2017, there was like 27,000 on average an esports player was earning, or just from the prize pool one game. And now it's 44,000 in 2018. And that number's only increasing. So is this a problem that you foresee is getting worse, and it's widening this inequality gap, and it's making the industry less progressive? Is that something is esports something you're concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, like the prize pool for Dota is something, is over $100 million, I want to say at this point, which is like, and I guess it gets shared between the top players and things like this. But yeah, it's an absolutely eye-watering amounts of money. So okay, so I can answer this question from like my true kind of radical anarcho self, where I want to say, we shouldn't have any hierarchies, and actually, this sports is, as Adorno would describe it, is just, a very, is what we kind of, I suppose, look at whilst we're actually being tied in chains by the capitalist, indoctrination. And actually, it's just like, it's a place we get to sort of like, we look at it and I don't know, voyeur it, not even voyeur it, I don't know, just whilst we are just resting, from our actually very alienated experiences, and so really to I think maybe sports altogether maybe should die, but so that's on one hand. On the other hand, I don't know, I think you hear those stories of like very, very rich football players or whatnot, and I think it's kind of interesting that they kind of get, I think, grilled way more than, I don't know, stockbrokers and our mass landlords, the people that are earning same amount of money but much more invisibly. And and to be fair, I think it's a bit better now for football players, but than used. And again, there's only a couple of hundred of them that are actually that rich. The rest of the people will try and make it. Will maybe have some sort of physical trauma, and then will not be able to compete again. And maybe they gave like 20 years of their lives to this and never made it. As well as there's like so few labor protections as well. Now we're entering also very similar with esports players. There's no sick pay, holiday, pensions. There you are probably paid a flat fee a lot of the time. You hear of these huge prize pools. What the actual player themselves see at the end of the day is a small portion of that. Because that goes to the manager, Yes, and there's the level of exploitation in esports team is it's on another level. Like essentially, you sign a contract with essentially a blood contract where then you are contracted to live in this particular dorm house with like 30 other youths, and train 16 hours a day, get very unbalanced diets. And then, you have to be trained. And eventually maybe you will win once, well, and a lot, which is fantastic. But then you'll see, my contract says that because I was just living off of this mansion, I don't know, for 2 years, now I have to give away like 80% of my earnings, and things like that. And to my production team behind me, or coaching team, and many different, and PR teams and things like this, So I think, the money sounds good, but actually at the end of the day, there's a huge kind of, the invisible industry that is behind it all, that takes away so much of the stars, of the stars money. So, but I think again that they are now organizing a little bit. There is an esports association, and we're hoping to have like, Inspire have like esports union, as well as you must have heard there are plans to have like YouTube unions, YouTube creators unions and things like this. So I think the more of stuff like this, the better, and that will only iron out that inequality that I think exists. And I wouldn't want to necessarily demonize a little 19-year-old that maybe won big, but again, there's no retirement plan. Like, what are you going to do later? And again, like a bit differently than with football players or other sports players, like a lot of the time the rules are kind of essentially the same, and the training is essentially the same. So you can kind of like, you can stick with similar training for a long period of time. Whereas with these sports players, games go in and out of fashion all the time, so many games that maybe you've trained for years is now just not in fashion anymore. That means that you have to retrain to a completely different video game. And that, begins a whole new cycle during which you're not earning, so it's just a much more volatile industry, and one that needs to be looked at again with just like empathy and care. I mean, again, I don't think it's it's fantastic to see, I don't know, hundreds of millions poured into these prize pools that, again, from my anarcho perspective, should be poured into, I don't know, like maybe saving climate, maybe not having climate change or things like that, but as is right now, as it should be looked at. And also I hate the aesthetics. Like, I think, that kind of like lasers, monster drink aesthetics of esports is just such a limiting, like, such a limiting kind of a frame of what that entire culture could be. And I mean, again, there's so much also space for political organization. Like you could have like anti-fascist esports teams and things like this. So I think it could be a fascinating cultural space. But as it stands, again, it's like the worst kind of like a hyper-capitalist, practices that we see in so many places that is just being implemented.
I think, and I think it's because the industry is also kind of young. The esports industry is youngish. It's not, I don't know how long it's been around for, but it's young in the fact that hopefully the protections are going to come in place sooner rather than later. I think it was, I can't remember, but like, for example, boxing, you have Mike Tyson, he lost a lot of his money to his manager, who took all of it. And I think there was no protections in place because he just signed a contract and he just lost it all. There's no protections in place and he didn't have like any kind of advisors to advise him what he was doing, and I hope, because the industry is young, but also we're in a place where these issues are more recognized, that it's going to be picked up a lot faster, and hopefully the industry is going to develop faster, in that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's hope.
Let's hope, because I talked to MP Alex Sobel, who's a shadow minister.
Oh, he's a legend as well. Yeah, he's like one of the very few people that like is legit interested in gaming, is vocal about it, and like, and really was very interested in like the unionization process for the video games industry here in the UK. And yeah, he's a babe.
He's so good, and like when I first started the podcast, he's like, oh, you've got a Nintendo. You can't see the Nintendo Switch, but there is a Nintendo Switch there usually. But I've adjusted my camera, so it's unfortunately not in the shot this time. But he got his games up on like the back of his like.
I'm surprised he's not like bigger than because he is like down with the millennials. He's quite rad, like I don't understand why he's not like being hyped up as like someone that could be in like Shadow Cabinet a bit more than.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, I don't know, but if the Labour wins the next election, he'll be able to.
Because he like really gets it. Like I think he understands where young people are at like much more than whatever is.
He loves games as well. Like he really does love games.
Yeah. He's not like a fake nerd. He's actually.
Honestly, because like I think that a lot of politicians are perceived as just being always, like in it for themselves, and they're always doing.
Most of them are.
Most of them are. But like seeing him come on and being so open about video games and how he's trying to promote the interests of
he's a babe.
Lobbying groups, and like, because I think we're going to get in the next couple of weeks the trade bodies on to talk about what they're doing in the video game industry as well, and how he works with them. But he was super open about, like you said, unions and everything about everything political, which people wouldn't think a politician would be open about those kinds of things in terms of video games. But
he's actually got creative ideas. That's why maybe he's not in the front. He's not on the Shadow Cabinet right now. I'm sorry, but this is my like anti Keith. Anti Keir.
Oh, anti Keir Starmer
coming out.
But I also, I wanted to quickly touch on Twitch.
Well, yeah, it's a good segue, right? Since we've seen AOC on Twitch.
AOC on Twitch. I'm learning these segues. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's working out quite well. I consider myself okay at it at the moment. I'm just like I'm not really planning.
I'm usually terrible, so I'm kind of celebrating myself on the inside right now.
That was really good. Honestly, you helped me with that one. AOC on Twitch, and I think that I'm going to write a thesis actually on whether or not I think video games are becoming more political in terms of becoming a political platform, but whether or not that's a good thing. AOC is gone on to Twitch playing Among Us and other games alongside her congressmen and women, and she's talking about politics while doing it. And you're kind of having this sort of, I'm connecting to you as the voter. Is this a good thing? Can it be used in a good way? What do you think? Do you think?
So no, I want to hear a little bit more about your thesis in terms of like, why is it a bad thing?
Well, I haven't really started the preliminary like discussion about it in the thoughts, but I think that it could be a bad thing if politicians use it too much. And
it's like a saturation thing.
Yeah, because it's like, well, I think games can. spread positive messages. But if it just becomes too political and you've got politicians competing with each other to try and get space on Twitch or what, I understand.
I love the idea that your standing in political party or whatnot or in parliament is only just how good you are at Quake.
Well, but the thing is like, I generally think though that there might be I generally think where like there might be a time where
sorry.
After you.
No. Where politicians what?
No, like where politicians are using video games and the medium or Twitch or other streaming services to connect with their voters in their political campaigns. Because like IOC, like it really did resonate with people and the media picked up on it and it was kind of scary.
So, but
in a good way and a bad way.
It kind of happens all the time anyways. Okay, not with games, but like, you remember how Cameron got like massively bashed when he like said that he was into West Ham or whatnot, or like when there's a politician that are not into football, then they're like, they will never get onto the national platform, so we look at. And it's also just about emerging medias, right? So everybody in the political milieu right now is just massively praising like Rishi Sunak's Instagram game, and just how great he is at that, So with generations, changing and like more people, our generation becoming, more of like a voter age and like actually interested in voting, not being like the cynical youths or whatnot. Like those will be our main mediums, and we'll just start knowing politicians from them. Like, I just think it's kind of inevitable. Now, look, I feel a little bit smug about it because I remember I was tweeting like 3 years ago being like, wouldn't it be amazing to have like Corbyn, open one of like the gaming conventions here in the UK, or like, have him on Twitch as well. And I used to play Quake and talk politics, very recently, like a year or two ago as well. And I felt like I was one of the pioneers of doing that, but then Hassan Piker took it all on and like made it like huge and things like this. So I'm just I'm a bit sulky in that sense. Like, God, I thought about this already.
I think there's still legs.
But I think it makes sense. And I mean, actually, someone who is, someone like AOC who is a woman of color and is not, would not necessarily be seen as an, she I think to many a wide gamer, let's say, they would never even give her a chance because of their like sometimes inherent like, racist and sexist attitudes. But if they see her like being like adorable and hilarious and maybe even good at like on, at some game or on Twitch stream, that creates a space for a conversation, for understanding one's values, and she is excellent at it, I don't think I think she's in like, an excellent communicator. And gaming is there to be like, I mean, it is just the biggest cultural outlet, so it's bigger than fine arts or whatever, or like it's not anymore like whether you like a particular musician or not. Now it's like the question we're going to be asking politicians during like question time or whatever, or question time special before the election or something will be like, so what video game you play, So I just think for better or for worse, and there's so many problems with the video games industry as is, and we have found some of them. I just think it's the future.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think it's the future too. And I think, like you said, what she's doing was great, and I just I really hope it doesn't go down the path of everyone kind of gets on it, because it might get a bit bad. But
like I don't want to see Theresa May on Twitch anytime soon.
Well, I think
that would be appropriate cultural appropriation.
I do think it is a positive development, and I hope that eventually, I think there's legs in. I don't want to give it away, but because someone might steal my idea. But there was legs in, like, like having politicians on stream, you know what I mean, spreading good messages. And, I wanted AOC on the show. Hopefully that will come one day.
That's the ambition. I've always wanted to like interview Chelsea Manning. I think it should be amazing, but she doesn't do interviews like at all. Doesn't like. I think she was invited to go on some of these streams, but she just like didn't go for it, which is I don't know. I guess she respects her privacy. But I know. But the thing is that it's also not the first time when politicians are in the gaming milieu. So like Steve Bannon. Well, I mean, hardly can be called a politician. I don't even know what we can call that bastard. Anyways, he was investing in World of Warcraft creators shares for like a long time, and he was one of the main architects of Gamergate, like stoking all the hatred and like the Reddit the Reddit threads and 4chan threads at the time, and giving a lot of space in Breitbart for people to write, fascist essentially articles about that. So kind of really unsavory politicians being in games is already something that exists. And for us, that's the thing. I think as progressives, we've been like very far behind that. So it's kind of about time that we maybe like, level it a little bit.
Definitely. What do you think about Twitch in general? Do you think that, like you were saying, sort of?
Well, it's owned by Amazon, so we can go do one.
Yeah.
Course,
so that's not a good start.
yeah. Like, I mean, yeah, and that's already for me is a no. It's aesthetic. I don't know what to say about it. I guess it's utilitarian, but it's not necessarily my thing.
I guess it's
people like
more
Ninja.
diverse.
I'm very sad that people like Ninja are like are influencers for young men because man is like thick as a brick. I don't know. So it's complicated and doesn't necessarily, again, I think it could be such a potent space for incredible blooming of artistic ambitions, especially now that we're all stuck at home. But it's not necessarily being utilized as that. Again, it's also not only a gaming kind of streaming platform anymore. A lot of people stream there, doing all types of things, whether it's chat, studying, like not safe for work stuff sometimes, and as well as like crafts or mental health discussions, so I mean, it is fascinating how, it just kind of was born one day and then somehow just like took over. And again, like as someone is like a, big lover of Gramsci or whatnot, like I always trying to look at these, I guess these I guess cultural waves and seeing how were they implemented with such speed and how did they change culture so quickly in such a substantial way, and like how can we, again, as progressives, we're so slow to do anything like this, or sometimes too late. So how can we implement these mediums for our own ends or create new ones? Like what would it mean to have a social media platform that would be created under conditions or under some sort of like manifesto that would be really thinking of how to challenge the order that we're in, but we're not even having those like much more like meta discussions right now. We're so like on a reactive mode at all times, and that's kind of depressing.
It's always reactive now, isn't it? I feel that, I don't know, but hopefully we'll be in a place where, as I think Alfie was saying, that is possibly in the future it'll be great to have a console that is maybe predominantly indie game based and it's based on protecting workers' rights and have these things in place to protect workers, and is also environmentally friendly, more of a sort of progressive console, because at the moment the consoles aren't really that progressive, so.
Right. No. So for instance, where could we be investing money ethically if we have any? Like, I'd really love to help out companies like Raspberry Pi, for instance. They're amazing. Like they create mini computers that are, all ethically, the minerals in them are all ethically sourced and they pay their staff well. So yeah, I think Raspberry Pi is hopefully the beginnings of the new great, leftist tech conglomerate or something like that. There's of course stuff like Fairphone as well, but you can't trump the $2 trillion Apple, not that easily, not with determination, and there's not enough of it because we're so just so separated and scattered as a political project, sadly, at the moment.
Well, what frustrates me is when you see sort of these big companies, for example, Epic Games and Apple, having these disputes about where they should put their games. You hear about Fortnite.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but it's frustrating because they're debating these issues about where they could put a game, even though the game's making a lot of money on other platforms, not necessarily just on Apple's platform. But they're not really focusing on the smaller, not smaller, but like other issues at place. It's just about it's just about their corporate sort of shenanigans, and it's just really frustrating. And it's not enough money and time's being put in to protect people.
Quite. You said it.
Yeah.
That's the anxiety that I have all the time. It's just that, like a lot of the time I get frustrated with like kind of self-care advice and like or like things that advice about mental health and stuff like this, because I'm like, it's not like I'm sad. I'm just like, it's just capitalism. It's like, it just brings anxiety on that front, and this like material anxiety and just thinking and just seeing, horrible things happening to good people, because everything, again, for all the genius of the human mind, we somehow settle down on this very, very, just a very dull way of doing things, which is profit incentive for board members, which is just seems like all this human ingenuity is just utilized for very wasteful means.
Yeah. So what do you think politicians can do to try and resolve
I mean,
that?
should it be politicians? That's a whole other question. Again, as an anarcho-syndicalist, I'm not sure if politicians are the answer, because they get corrupted so easily. I think with power comes corruption more often than not, and that's a huge problem. And anarchists are also some of the very few people that talk about social relations as a place where much more growth needs to be done before we form like these massive collective actions or whatnot, because that's what's been happening in history, right? That the revolutions happen and then the next day so many things can go wrong because our social relations haven't been fixed. And I'm not optimistic on that side, because what internet also enabled is a hierarchy competition between political actors, even progressive political actors, so and very, very, and it kind of also for all of its openness, I feel like there's been also just sadly a lack of collaboration between different regions and countries, so sort of America just feels like it kind of only does what's there, although whatever is happening there is massively affecting everybody else. But there's kind of almost a closing down of certain issues, whereas there's a lot of historical precedent for a lot of kind of ways that movements evolve that could be kind of learned from. But in more practical terms, well, look, I mean, Sanders, in his manifesto was just a very, very basic social democratic one that, in a country like Denmark would almost seem almost center right. And then, but my kind of general sort of centrist point of view would be like, we should just implement similar kind of policies like they have in Scandinavia, whether that's, nationalized utilities and of course healthcare and like really, really great minimum wage and like amazing social security and stuff like this. However, once you start seeing corruption and also like embezzlement everywhere, it's not like those countries, it's not like Scandinavian countries are rich by themselves or by their own genius. A lot of the time, again, they just outsource so much of their profit making incentives to the global south, and like the consumption is from like imported goods and also from like oil production and things like this, so which also hopefully we won't have around for that much. So international cooperation, if anything, needs to happen, decolonizing the global south from what's happening, from what's being done to it by the the Western businesses. And of course there are some amazing ideas in some of the manifestos as well, even from like whether it was Corbyn's ideas and things like this. And in the short term, of course, we should be adopting them, but we can't stop there, because like not only have like profit incentive motives entered of course, individual companies, but also our political milieus where there's, corruption and lobbying is rampant, but also our minds, like just the level of kind of like self-aggrandizing and fighting and kind of pure, I don't know whether they're purity competitions, but also just like, just corruption in our minds that's happening like every day. We have to try and like undo that. And I'm working on it constantly, and we have to just like put empathy at the center of it all, rather than just this wish and need to like bash everybody all the time.
Exactly. It's all about empathy at the end of the day. I know in COVID, a lot of people have tried to be empathetic, but they haven't been. And just be nice to each other. That's the method. Just be nice to each other.
Don't be a dick.
Exactly. Well, Marijam, thank you for joining me today. It's been really great to have a chat.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Where can people catch you? Is there anywhere?
Sure. My website has all the portfolio of everything that I've kind of like done thus far. And if you like similar conversations and thoughts about similar ideas, then check out that with all my like video and written content as well. Find me on Twitter at Marijam Did. check out Left Up and Anarcho-Agonions, my other little show that I've done a few years back that was excellent, and I still miss it a lot. And hopefully there'll be new Left Up in the future. But you see how fascinating. I was just talking about like, you know, the kind of the leftist influencer types or whatever, and how everything is just so stratified now. And even me myself with my thoughts, I also like, I am a brand of some sort, like I think most people are, and like that is also an issue, and that is also a problem. But like, I don't know, I have to pay the bills, you know? So there we are. But yeah, at all times it's like there's this conflict in my head.
Well, that's the takeaway from the podcast. You know, pay the bills, be empathetic, help people, be nice to people, and bees. Make sure to subscribe and follow. We need more subscribers. So yeah, do that, all that good stuff. Thank you.